All right, welcome back to the second part of this kind of how to find crappie with the sonar unit. This is the how to find brush piles, or where you should start looking for brush piles. So before I even start going on the sonar, using side imaging and down imaging, let's just go ahead and pull up a map. And I want to talk about the percentage triangle again in this one. And for those of you who don't know, the percentage triangle is not my idea. It's full credit to Seth Burrell. I'm going to link his YouTube channel, Angler Experience, in the description box below. You can go ahead and click on that. There's a bunch more information. He's got a lot of videos on walleye fishing. I think he's only got 3 or 4 on crappie fishing, but it's an idea that I bought into fully now, and it's worked out for me this entire year. So if we pull up the map, the brush piles you should be looking, or the places you should be starting to look for these brush piles, are in the middle part of that triangle towards the point. Now, if they're man-made and they're placed in a spot where people were naturally catching crappie anyway, this middle part of the triangle towards the point, this is where the crappie are going to be in the summer months and into the fall. Deeper weed lines, deeper drop-offs, they can escape to safety, so it's not really a whole lot of movement if they want to push to that 10-12 feet of water into the weeds to go feed, and they can push out to over 30 feet of water and suspend if they feel pressured by either predator fish or fishing pressure, and they can suspend into safety. So ideally, this is where you'd start looking on a map. So if you pull up a bunch of maps on Google Map, the Navionics, I use that quite a bit. I'm not sponsored by Navionics or anything. They got a free web app. I'll link that one to in the description below. You can check that one out as well. You got depth contours and everything. So when you pull up one of these maps, ideally you want to circle these areas. You're going to start where these crappie are going to be spawning, starting their spawning bays, and work out to that middle part of the triangle and towards the point of the triangle. So yeah, that's where you're going to want to start looking for these brush piles. Now, if they're man-made, if people drop them in there and they're not, you know what, let's back up. I'm going to start by how to find 2 different ones. This is the lake one, okay? So using that percentage triangle, that's how you find them on lakes. On rivers, if there's like a river system going through it, you want to start looking for brush piles, because these will be naturally occurring. The driftwood will get piled up on the downstream side of bends, okay? Because that's where the current's going to eddy and push all that debris back into that bend. So those will be the natural ones. So if you're fishing a lot of reservoirs, I don't know, I think Kentucky Lake is a reservoir, Cumberland, those types of lakes that are not natural lakes, or they're dammed up, or they're created reservoirs or flowage systems. You want to find the creek channel and the downstream side of the creek bend. That is the highest probability of finding some sort of structure, so brush, weed lines, because it's slower current. The current's actually eddying back. It's the eddy of the current, so it's pushing all that debris and all that food back against that current. Wow, there's a lot of fish over open water right now. Holy smokes. Anyway, so over river systems, that's where you're going to find them naturally. On lakes, you want to start in the middle part of the triangle, work to the point. Ideally, they'd be next to deeper weed lines. As these crappie go from spawn to post-spawn, those post-spawn crappie in that 10 to 12 feet of water, the weed lines in 10 to 12 feet. If there's a weed line in 15 plus feet of water, great. That's where you probably think these brush piles would be. Now, obviously, man-made brush piles, they're set up, they're placed in spots where they might have easy access to. So close to a boat launch, close to somebody's house, right off of somebody's dock. You know, these are spots that crappie may not normally be at, other than the fact that people went ahead and wanted fish out in front of their favorite fishing hole, or their ease of access fishing spot, and they placed a brush pile there. So I guess first start with, if you're on a natural lake, first start with this middle part of the triangle, work out towards the tip along shorelines that have spawning grounds, okay? They have to have spawning grounds, because these crappie will move in the same pattern from where they're spawning grounds. So if you find the spawning bay, they're going to shift out during post-spawn, summer, winter, all the way out through this percentage triangle, out to points, and then they're going to push back in come next spring. So that's ideally where you'd find these fish first. River systems, the river systems are a little tough. If you can find spawning bays on river systems, that's a really good spot to start. Otherwise, natural creek channels, the downstream side where the current eddies back up, pushes the debris back, that's where I'd go, that's where I'd start with it. And if they're man-made and dropped at random spots, I guess the only way you find them is with sonar. So that's what we're gonna get into right now with the sonar. Now this is a 2D sonar I have set up. I actually have some brush piles that I just missed. That's a huge fishing lure. Hold on, there's a musky lure floating right there. I found 2 musky lures today, by the way. I'll show you to you in 1 second. Hold on, let me grab this. Oh, yes. I think this is the same exact bait I caught this morning. It was on the same setup too. This is like super thick fluorocarbon. This has got to be like 50-pound fluorocarbon or something. I don't know what it is. Oh, hold on. Okay, so here's the first one I found. I actually hooked it. I was just messing around jig fishing. I know this is, sorry about that. So I just found 2 musky lures today, to recap. This is the first one I found. I actually hooked into the braided line while I was jig fishing a different brush pile earlier this morning. And yeah, look at that. And they're like the exact, well, they're not quite the exact same. And this one was just floating on the surface, but they're the same setup for the most part. I'm guessing this is fairly common setup for musky fishermen. I don't fish musky a whole lot. Actually, I've never fished musky for open water, and I've caught a couple musky ice fishing, but never open water. So it looks like 50-pound fluorocarbon. Comes with the leader and everything. Both these guys have a leader. Look at that. I'm gonna guess these are. I know musky lures are not cheap. I'm gonna guess they're like 15 bucks, probably more. Just. All right, let's get back to how to find these brush piles. All right. So ideally, if you have side imaging sonar, that's the best option for you right now. Here's a brush pile right here. If I go to down imaging, that's a brush pile. It's an older one. It's kind of decayed. I know there's some other brush piles in here. Okay, here we go. So these look like brush piles right here. There's some fish on them if I go to my down imaging. And if I go to my map here, this is a big spawning bay down here, okay? And these brush piles are placed gradually on this point as they go out. I have them marked off because I already have them GPS'd here. But they're placed in a spot that these crappie would naturally be. But behind me here, hold on, let me spin this boat so you can see here. So behind me here, it gets shallow, like less than 5 feet of water, thick weeds. These crappie are going to be spawning in those areas. As this point goes out, there's some brush piles in 10 to 12 feet of water for those post-spawn fish. Now we're in late summer right now, and these crappie are going to be in 20+ feet of water. That's where these brush piles are right now. I'm in 19 feet, and these brush piles are probably in 20 to 25 feet of water. These crappie can either suspend up above them, which is what it looked like they were doing. There's another brush pile. There's some fish suspended off a brush pile. So ideally, you'd have side imaging sonar to be able to see. I got it 95 left and right here. And again, this side imaging sonar, I'll probably do more videos on this, but the closer your range is, so if you go in 70 feet, the better picture you're gonna see as far as brush piles, fish suspended over these brush piles. And if you don't have side imaging sonar, you just have the 2D sonar, just remember, 1/3 of the depth, that's what your surface area, that's what you're covering on the lake bottom. So when you go to troll these shorelines, you're gonna start in those spawning bays, you're gonna look out, you're trying to find points, you're just gonna troll along those points. And the 2D sonar, you're covering 1/3 of the depth. So I'm in 22 feet of water, I'm covering 7 feet wide. So if you have 2D sonar, preferably you'd have some sort of GPS on it, so you could see depth contours, you could see kind of the area you've already trolled through. Just remember, you're gonna try and go 7 feet each side. It's gonna take a lot longer if you just have 2D sonar versus side imaging sonar. That's why side imaging is so valuable And a lot of these units now, they're reasonably priced. This is a first generation Helix 9 side imaging unit. I think they still sell these. They're older, and you know, there's $600-700 compared to these high-end ones that are like $3,000. If you can't afford $600-700 and you're looking something in like the $200 range, I definitely recommend. Almost all sonar units now have 2D and GPS. If you're going to get the 2D, get the GPS as well. You'll be able to see your tracking and move, you know, every 7 feet or however many feet length you need to move over to cover that next section of water, so that you don't miss these brush piles. I showed in the last video kind of what the brush piles look like on the 2D sonar. Side imaging sonar, this is not mega side imaging, by the way. This is first generation side imaging. So the picture is not as clear if you have mega side imaging. Mega side imaging is much, much clearer, okay? The newer models of side imaging, not just Humminbird, Lowrance, I think they call it structure scan or something like that, and then Garmin, it's called side view or something. It's all the same thing. It's side imaging, it's looking sideways away from your boat. But this was mostly how do you find the brush piles. So start spawning bays, draw the percentage triangle, find the points, find that middle section, that percentage triangle, troll that contour, okay? Because ideally crappie will naturally be there, that deeper weed line where that weed line edge stops. They're going to try to find deeper water to suspend off of. That's where these crappie in the summertime are going to naturally be, so it would make sense that people drop brush piles there throughout the year. If their brush piles are just dropped at random locations, you know, that's kind of a hit and miss type of thing. On this lake that I'm on right now, they actually have GPS coordinates because the Wisconsin DNR dropped these brush piles, so you can find GPS coordinates online, and a lot of states might have that. If these brush piles are dropped by the local government or the game wardens, conservation officers, whatever you call them, usually they'll have some sort of GPS markings on them, and you can find those online. You might have to dig a little bit, but eventually you'll find them. If they're dropped by just the guy who lives on the lake, you know, maybe you ask him. I don't know. Go ahead and ask him. I got a seaplane taking off behind me here. And on river systems, go ahead, look on the downstream side of current break, downstream sides of bends in the creek channels. That's where the current's going to eddy back up and push that debris back up into, you know, a pocket or an edge. That's where you're going to find a lot of structure. That's natural structure. I hope there's enough. I gave you enough information. I didn't go into full detail on the side imaging unit. That'll probably be a different video. But hope I gave you enough information to actually go ahead and try and find these brush piles, give you kind of narrow down a large section of water. That's the whole point of this percentage triangle, is to narrow down these sections of water that, you know, to be honest, there's only 10 to 20% of the water is holding the fish most of the time. So you're not going to find fish out. I'm not going to find fish out in the middle of this lake. I mean, you might find a random school of crappie or a random school of walleye or something, but that's it. Appreciate you watching. Post in the comment section if you have any questions, if you want me to make another video to kind of clarify anything. Yeah, anything at all, post it in the comment sections. I'll get back to you in the comment sections. And if I get the same kind of idea showing up in the comment sections, I'll make another video specifically talking about that idea, whatever it may be. All right, be sure to like and share the video. And if you're not a subscriber, below the video, bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there's a red subscribe button. You should probably click that. And then after that, you should really click that bell. That bell notifies you every time I post a video, so you gotta click the bell. And at the end of the video, you'll see my face holding a crappie. You can click on that as well to subscribe. Appreciate you watching. We'll see ya.